What started as an innocent prank ended in a real affair with his brother. He cut both of us forever. What started as a simple prank turned into something neither of us expected. Now everything's broken, and I'm left wondering, how did we get here? I really don't know why I'm sharing this, or what I expect to get from it, but maybe if I say it out loud, it'll make more sense. Or maybe someone out there will tell me I'm not the only one who's done something this messed up, because right now I feel like the worst person alive. And it's not like I meant for any of this to happen. I swear it started as a joke. A stupid, harmless joke. That's what I keep telling myself anyway, even though I know deep down that it stopped being harmless a long time ago. My name is Eleanor. I'm 27 years old, and I live in New York City. Until recently, I was engaged to a man named Jake. We'd been together for 3 years, and I thought I was happy. I met Jake 4 years ago at a charity gala my firm was hosting. That was in August 2021. I'd been cornered by some overenthusiastic donor and desperately needed an escape. Jake was there, looking just as uncomfortable as I was, which made me smile. We slipped away from the crowd, ended up sitting in a quiet corner, talking about everything from our awkwardness at formal events to our favorite novels. He was grounded, genuine, and calmness I didn't know I needed. By our second date, I already knew I was in deep. Everything with Jake felt easy, like I could finally breathe. 2 years later, during a quiet weekend in the Catskills, he got down on one knee, and I said yes without hesitation. Now, in 2025, we're stepping into our 4th year together, and it still feels just as right, or at least it did, until something happened that changed everything. Although I accepted his proposal, Jake told me we'd have a proper engagement with both of our families present, and of course, because I love him, I was truly looking forward to it. I really did. He's a good guy. Steady, kind, never made me question his loyalty. He's not the type to play games or start drama, and I think that's part of what drew me to him in the first place. After so many bad relationships, Jake felt safe. His brother Sebastian was the opposite. I didn't know him too well when Jake and I first started dating. He wasn't around a lot. He was always doing something else, traveling, making music, chasing some new creative idea. But when he was around, he made sure everyone knew it. He had this energy that sucked people in. I never took it seriously, though. I had Jake. I was sure about Jake. The beginning of everything came during Jake's birthday party. It was a chill thing, just a few friends at our place. Nothing fancy. After most people left, a couple of us stayed behind and we started doing this dare game. Someone outside the room would send a dare by text, and whoever got picked had to do it. We were tipsy, laughing at everything, and not really thinking much about it. I was dared to flirt with Sebastian for 5 minutes. At first, I hesitated because it wasn't something I wanted to do. It felt a little weird, but people were egging me on, and it was supposed to be funny. To me, I had thought it would make everyone laugh, and I really didn't think Sebastian would care. So I went along with it. I turned on the act, said some dumb stuff. Everyone laughed. It was just a joke. That's what I told myself. But something changed after the prank of that night. At first, I wasn't anything big, just small things. A few more texts from Sebastian than usual. He'd send me a meme or a song and say it reminded him of something I said. Initially, I thought Sebastian was just being playful, but it kept happening. And the worst part is that I didn't stop. Yes, I didn't tell him to back off. Not only that, I didn't tell Jake, his brother, about it. I just let it keep happening, thinking it was safe. I started replying more than I should have. Not in a flirty way, at least not at first, but I wasn't being careful either. Although I knew there was something off about the way we were texting, I kept telling myself it was nothing. And sincerely, I think part of me liked the attention. It made me feel loved in a way I hadn't felt in a while then. Of course, Jake's a good guy, but he was always busy. He was focused on work, and sometimes I felt like I was just part of the routine. But now with Sebastian, everything felt different again. I felt like I had someone's full attention, and I didn't realize how much I missed that until it started happening. Then it turned into more. Still not physical, not yet, but emotionally, I was slipping. I was often thinking about him during the day. I'd check my phone hoping he'd messaged me. I started dressing differently whenever I knew he would be around. I hate even admitting that, but it's true. I started craving his reaction. I started wondering if he felt the same. And the worst part is, I wasn't even sure I wanted to stop it. One night, Jake and I hosted a small gathering. Nothing big, just a few people over for drinks and board games. Sebastian showed up late, and I told myself it didn't matter. But the moment he walked in, everything in me changed. That period, I kept wondering if Jake noticed how strange I was behaving, especially when his brother was around. Obviously, I waiting for him to ask me what was wrong, but he didn't. And maybe that made it worse. The fact that he trusted me. The fact that I was slowly breaking that trust without even realizing how deep it would go. Funnily enough, I didn't tell anyone while all of these were going on. Not my friends and not even Jake. I just kept going like nothing was happening. But inside, I knew I was crossing a line, and it was only a matter of time before something gave. As I'm sharing this right now, I'm thinking back and wondering what would have happened if I had just told Jake about the prank. Maybe Jake would have laughed it off, or even spoken to his brother himself. If that had happened, I wouldn't be here now. But perhaps this is what made my story pathetic. While all these were going on, Jake and I were already planning our engagement. It was through this I got to meet Jake's mom and his sister. They came over during one of those weekends, and it was clear from the start that they liked me. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation. His mom asked a few questions about me, mostly polite ones, but I could tell she was satisfied with whatever answers Jake had already given her. His sister was more easygoing, just like his brother Jake. She smiled a lot, nodded whenever I spoke, and gave me that look people give when they already consider you part of the family. From that moment, things moved quickly. Jake's mom began discussing possible dates. His sister had already started looking at venues online. There were rumors of who to invite and what kind of dress would suit me. I wasn't even asked what I wanted. It was as if everything was already in motion, and I was simply stepping into a plan that had long been made. We settled on March 7th, not because it held any special meaning, but because it was convenient. Everyone seemed to agree it gave just enough time to prepare without dragging things out. His mom marked it down in a small notebook she carried. Since as Jake and I had already agreed that the engagement would involve both of our families, I was asked to let my family know about it. I remember calling my dad that same evening to share the news. He had no issues with the date. I had already told him about my relationship with Jake before, and he was very supportive. After I explained the engagement plans, he just asked a few questions about Jake, then said it was fine. He trusted my judgment. Meanwhile, as all the engagement preparations were going on, Sebastian was getting closer to me. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was enjoying the attention, assuming it would fade away and not lead to anything serious. But I was wrong. I remember one weekend, Jake invited Sebastian over to help us with something. It was the first time I really felt nervous being in the same room with him. I could feel the tension, but no one else seemed to notice. Jake was just being his usual self, cracking jokes, and I was pretending not to feel what I felt. All through, I pretended I didn't notice the way Sebastian looked at me, or how I looked back. That night, after Sebastian left, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep well. The following week, Monday, I woke early and checked my phone. Sebastian had already texted, asking if I wanted to meet for a drink that evening. It was clear what he meant, and I didn't hesitate. Jake usually worked late on Mondays, so I knew I had the evening free. We met at a small, quiet bar just a few blocks away. Sebastian was already seated when I arrived, sipping a dark drink. I joined him and ordered something strong, more out of nerves than desire. We talked for a long time, but not in the usual way. At some point, I brought up the prank we had played, maybe hoping to diffuse the tension or steer the night back to safer territory. But everything changed after I mentioned that. He became still and pretended as if he didn't know what had been going on between us. But as soon as I mentioned it, I saw a change in Sebastian's expression. Then he looked at me and said it wasn't a joke, though it was meant to be a prank. The atmosphere around us changed. It felt like there were things we weren't saying. I wanted to laugh it off, to pretend I didn't notice the change in his tone, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. To be honest, I felt the same way. If not, I could have easily gotten up and left or even apologized and walked away. We left the bar late, walking into the night with a silent understanding between us. I thought that was it, that nothing had changed. But when Sebastian hugged me goodbye, his arms stayed around me a little longer than usual. At that moment, I knew the truth. The line had already been crossed. Nothing happened that night, not until 3 days later. It was Thursday, February 20th, 2025. a date I'll never forget, because what I did that day cost me the sweet relationship I once cherished. It happened when Jake went to Chicago for a business conference. The timing seemed perfect, like everything was lining up for me to make a mistake. Jake kissed me goodbye that morning, but it felt like he was already gone. I watched him leave, hearing the sound of his suitcase rolling on the floor. He promised to call when he landed, but he seemed distracted. As soon as the door closed, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. It was like I had been waiting for him to leave. Sebastian showed up that evening. I hadn't invited him. Maybe he sensed Jake's absence, or maybe he just needed to escape whatever shadows chased him in his own life. Either way, he arrived with a bottle of wine and a smile that hinted at something I couldn't quite place. We were drinking in the living room, talking about nothing in particular. We laughed about silly things, like the Knicks' bad season and the subway system's problems. It felt comfortable and familiar. But as we drank more, our conversation changed. The silences between us got longer, and the air in the room felt different. We just sat there, next to each other on the couch, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Sebastian suddenly told me something that shocked me. He said he couldn't stop thinking about me. I was taken aback. "I know," I whispered without thinking. It was true. The connection between us had grown strong. I couldn't stop thinking about him either. I wish I could say I stopped things from going further, but I didn't. When Sebastian took my hand, I let him. When he kissed me, I kissed him back. I felt guilty right away. My mind was telling me to stop, but I couldn't. It wasn't just that I was attracted to Sebastian. It was the way he looked at me, listened to me, and made me feel like I mattered. Jake hadn't been making me feel that way for a long time. Sebastian made me feel comfortable and excited at the same time. We spent the night together, and it was a mistake. The next morning, I felt ashamed. Sebastian left before Jake got back from Chicago, but the damage was already done. The days that followed were tough. Jake called me every night, and I pretended everything was fine. I laughed and told him I loved him, but it was hard. The guilt didn't go away. It actually got worse. I felt like I was carrying a heavy weight. And then there was Sebastian. Things between us were awkward at first, but they changed. Now there's a deeper feeling between us, but it's complicated. We both want something, but we're also bitter about what happened. Sebastian and I kept seeing each other, and any time he came over when Jake wasn't around, we would end up making love. It started on the 20th of February, and after that, it happened many more times. In fact, I lost count of how often we were together. Jake was away so often, and Sebastian just kept showing up. Sebastian seemed just as torn. His eyes always looked troubled, like he was struggling with what to do. Keeping our relationship a secret was hurting me. It was eating away at the trust I used to have. Every time I lied to Jake, it felt like our relationship was getting weaker. And Sebastian was changing. He would go from being kind to being angry, and it scared me. The most painful part was that my engagement with Jake was just around the corner, set for the 7th of March. Meanwhile, I was secretly making love to his brother. It was only about 8 days to the big day. Jake and I hadn't done much to prepare, but he kept telling me not to worry, that everything would be ready. So I figured maybe his mom was handling all the arrangements. What I didn't know at the time was that Sebastian had no idea about the engagement. Maybe because he wasn't as close to their mom as Jake was. But it seemed like Jake eventually told him, and that's when everything changed. That afternoon, Sebastian called me. He sounded serious, almost panicked. He asked if Jake was home, and when I said no, he told me he was coming over. When he arrived, he didn't waste time. He came just to tell me that what we were doing was wrong and that he couldn't go on with it. His face showed how broken he was. I'll never forget what he said before walking out. He told me he wished he could undo everything we had done, but he couldn't. Sebastian told me that he's Jake's brother, and we're supposed to be like family. He said he can't think about what we did. He looked really upset, like he was in pain. Then he turned around and left, slamming the door behind him. I was left alone in the dark, trying to understand what had happened. My hands were shaking, and I didn't know what to do. Days went by, and Sebastian didn't come around as much. We didn't text each other as often, and when we did talk, it felt awkward. The guilt was affecting him just like it was affecting me. Sebastian's distance made things worse. Every conversation was hard. Jake noticed that something was wrong between Sebastian and me, but he didn't say anything. If he suspected something, he kept it to himself. He just ignored the problems that were growing in our lives. But the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. I knew something was going to happen. It was like a storm was coming, and it would destroy everything. And that's exactly what happened. One morning, Jake was getting ready for work when his phone rang. I saw it was Sebastian calling. Jake's tone changed when he answered, and I knew something was up. The way Jake was talking, it was clear it wasn't just a normal call. My heart sank, and I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew things were about to fall apart. I felt a rush of fear. I couldn't stop thinking about whether Sebastian had told Jake what happened. Was this the moment everything would fall apart? I tried to stay calm, hoping the conversation wouldn't reveal anything. When Jake hung up, I saw the change in his face. His jaw was tight, and his eyes looked cold. I froze. Something was wrong. I tried to hide my worry and asked if everything was okay. Jake hesitated before answering. He said Sebastian wanted to meet tonight and that it was important. His tone was neutral, but I sensed there was more to it. When Jake said important, I felt a shock. Sebastian wouldn't usually ask to meet like this. He'd come to the apartment if he had something to say. My mind was racing and I was getting panicked. I tried to stay calm and forced a smile. I told Jake to go to the meeting, trying to sound casual, but I was scared and I didn't want Jake to see it. I knew something was off. Sebastian was planning something. Jake didn't question it and left for work. I was left alone with my thoughts, and the house felt overwhelming. The minutes were dragging on, and I was waiting for what was going to happen next. Jake returned home that evening with a bottle of wine and an exhausted smile. He spoke to me like he always did. But there was something off in his look, something that made me want to shrink away. However, when I tried to engage, the conversation was awkward. I noticed Jake looking at me closely, asking sharp questions like he was trying to find something out. But everything unfolded a few minutes later. We were sitting on the couch, and Jake asked me something that changed everything. "Eleanor," he said, his voice calm but a little too calm, "do you love my brother?" The question shocked me. I couldn't think, and my mouth felt dry. I stared at him, trying to come up with a way to deny what had happened. Jake was looking at me, waiting for an answer. He didn't want me to lie. He wanted the truth. My voice shook when I spoke. I said Jake's name and apologized, but my words were weak. I saw the pain on his face, and for a moment he lost control. Then he looked away, his expression hardening. He stared at the empty wine glass and said, "So it's true." The silence that followed was overwhelming. I wanted to reach out to him and beg for forgiveness, but I didn't. Jake asked me how long it had been going on. His voice was cold. I told him it had been weeks. I tried to explain, but I didn't know where to start. It began as a joke or a mistake, but it got out of control. Jake nodded, but I couldn't read his expression. He said, "With Sebastian," and I wanted to tell him it didn't mean anything. But that would have been a lie. It did mean something, and that was the problem. Jake stood up and told me I needed to leave. Though he said it calmly, but out of nowhere, he shouted angrily, like he had been holding it in for too long, that I needed to pack my things and leave. The kind of voice you don't argue with. I was still trying to make sense of what was happening when Sebastian showed up. It felt almost like he had sensed there would be chaos and made sure to be there right when it started. He tried to talk to Jake, to say it wasn't completely my fault. He tried to explain himself. Jake didn't want to hear it. He pushed Sebastian away and said he had trusted him with everything, and he betrayed him. I've never seen Jake look at someone like that before. He told Sebastian to get out and never come back. He said he didn't care if the two of us moved in together, but he never wanted to see either of us again. Then he said if either of us ever came near his apartment again, he wouldn't hesitate to call the cops. Sebastian didn't say anything. He just started walking towards the door. Add sentence. Obviously, Sebastian will suffer this. He has always depended on Jake financially, though he works, but he doesn't earn much from his job. From what Jake had told me earlier, Sebastian has been the stubborn one in the family, and such he couldn't finish his college. So Jake, that went to school even up to Maurer level, has a stable job, and the whole family depends on him, including who he has been paying his rent, and even the car Sebastian uses Jake had given him on his birthday. I had told Jake won't mention anything about the car, but to my surprise, as Sebastian was walking to the out, Jake called him back and told him that it's good that drove to this place. He then told him to drop the car key. It was even Jake's last words to him that made it worse. He told Sebastian since he was now big enough to betray him with the woman he loved, he should also be big enough to pay his rent henceforth. Jake turned back and dropped the car on the table and left angrily. I stood there, not knowing what to do. I had nowhere to go except to a friend's place. I told Jake I would pack my things. He didn't respond. He turned his back and walked away. That hurt more than if he had yelled at me. Packing felt strange. My hands were shaking. I kept trying to stop myself from crying. I looked around at the apartment while I packed, and it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place where everything ended. That night, I tried to reach Sebastian on the phone. I called several times, but he didn't pick up. In fact, he never called back till today. He cut me off completely. I never saw or heard from him again. The engagement was supposed to be announced in a few days, but no one brought it up. Not Jake, not his family, not even his mother, who used to call me every weekend. That silence said everything. I found out later that Sebastian had already told Jake everything. Maybe he thought I wasn't serious about Jake. Maybe he didn't believe I would actually go through with the engagement. I don't know, but it didn't matter anymore. 2 days after I moved out, I called my dad and told him the engagement was off. He asked why, and I just said it didn't work out. I couldn't bring myself to explain what really happened. The guilt stayed with me. I knew I had no one to blame but myself. I made the choices that led me here. Since then, other guys have come into my life, but none of them were Jake. None had his quiet presence, his steady calm. And it wasn't just him. His family's love for me was something I have never felt anywhere else. It was genuine, warm, and rare. I tried to act normal after it all fell apart. Some nights I slept too much. Some nights I didn't sleep at all. I spent most of my time thinking, replaying everything, wishing I could go back and do things differently. But I couldn't. I had to live with it. No one reached out, no one asked questions. It was like I had disappeared from their lives completely. This wasn't something I could fix. The trust was gone, the damage was done, and I was the one who caused it. This is what happens when you let things go too far, when you think no one will find out, when you ignore the consequences. This is what happens when you hurt the people who loved you most. This is the story of my life.